Good evening, everybody. True spirituality is not about what is generally thought. It's not about what is generally understood. True spirituality is about subtlety. True spirituality is about intelligence. I think the way most people, or let's say many people, approach spirituality is a rather heavy-handed business, sort of a lifestyle, a sledgehammer lifestyle approach of adopting a lot of particularly explicit behaviors or posturings or lifestyle choices. And the truth of the matter is that's irrelevant. You can do all that stuff or not, and it doesn't really matter, because it's not about the heavy-handed aspect, it's about the subtleties, it's about the intelligence that can be discovered within any mode of behavior, that can be discovered within any functioning. And that nuance, that subtlety, that intelligence, is the very essence, the very lifeblood of genuine spirituality. And it is not dependent upon particular activities, it's not dependent upon particular behaviors, it's not dependent upon doing particular things or avoiding doing particular things. It's about finding the subtlety, finding the nuance, finding the delicacy, finding the higher harmonics of experience within any activity at all. I can't think of anything to add to that. Anyone that would like to have a conversation, we have a microphone we can pass around and you can speak into it if you'd like, or we can sit and listen to some nice music and hang out, whatever you enjoy. But I recommend trying to pay attention to the subtlety, the nuance, the delicacy, the lightness, the unbearable lightness of being, to coin a phrase. I think I just set a record for briefest opening remarks in any of my talks heretofore. I'll strive to do better, I promise. John?
When you talk about the more of experience, are you referring to Are you referring to patterning, or what is the more of actuality and the more of experience?
The more is that the actual characteristics, let's call them, that are present as experience are unlimited. So whatever you happen to be noticing, there's more to be noticed. And more than that, and more than that, and more than that. So the more is just experience itself, which is, of course, unfathomable. We have this word experience, but it doesn't refer to anything that you can define. It's just a convenient indicator of the fullness of actuality. And that fullness is an unlimited, infinite fullness, and that's what the more is about. The only thing that limits our experience and our appreciation of the actuality of our experience is that we tend to exercise censorship in our noticing. So we tend to let ourselves be aware of relatively small portions of our experience. And in actuality, there are inconceivable other qualities actually present in real time, always, that are available if we notice them. And so this is what I mean by more. There's always more. Whatever you happen to be noticing in your experience, there's always more to be noticed. And in noticing this more, you discover the unlimitedness, you discover the endless subtlety, the endless nuance, the endlessness of this actuality that is present right here, right now. And you discover that it is inherently transcendent. In other words, unlimited, not unbounded, not able to be contained in any way whatsoever. This is actually the case. Concretely, this is the case with your experience right here, right now. Always, always is. So the only challenge, if there is one, is to notice that fact. And by noticing that fact, you appreciate and participate in unlimitedness, infinity, absolute transcendence, as an actuality, not as something to aspire to or some lofty philosophical ideal that you're oriented to or something like that, but just the simple, undeniable actuality that is what is the case, always.
So actuality and radiance are one and the same.
One and the same. Radiance is just a symbolic way of indicating this actuality because by its very nature it can be said to be radiant in the sense that it is never-endingly creative, never-endingly dynamic, never-endingly positive in the sense that it actively comes forth into experience. It shines forth, so to speak, which is rather analogous to the notion of radiance.
Thank you.
Yes. So in that context, it doesn't seem like there's anything to do. It's about noticing.
Yeah.
Yet we have all these things that we do,
Mm-hmm.
and we have all kinds of spiritual techniques and practices and things to try to that I guess are designed to expand that area of experience, or what we recognize as experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are they worth anything?
Well, you may have missed my opening remarks, which were the briefest on record tonight.
I may have.
And in my opening remarks, what I said, I'll reiterate. They're so short I can repeat it all, and it'll be done before you're done sipping your chai. But basically what I said, that genuine spirituality is about subtlety and intelligence. And, of course, most understandings of spirituality in the general populace have to do with all sorts of behaviors and lifestyle choices and actions to do and actions to avoid and so on and so forth. And essentially all of those are fine, but that's not really what it's about. The fundamental point is to discover subtlety and intelligence within the context of any activity. And so, which is doable within the context of, so-called spiritual activities or otherwise, just as well. So, these activities are fine. Any activity is fine. It's all a kind of a vehicle for experimentation, for exploration. And again, the operative principle in exploration is intelligence and subtlety. So if you're with any activity intelligently, then it can become a viable vehicle for exploration. On the contrary, of course, if you're with any activity with, shall we say, less intelligently, it may not become so and can just become a vehicle for passing the time. And so this applies to all sorts of, spiritual practices or not. Now, having said that, it's certainly the case that different activities provoke sort of, let's say, different ranges or realms of qualitative experience to explore, and it can be valuable or interesting to stumble onto something that seems to click for you or have some resonance or have some kind of a dimension for you where it's maybe easier or more, for some reason, more amenable to the exercise or development of subtlety and intelligence. So trying things, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But again, it's not about the activity, it's about being with it with subtlety and intelligence.
So do you want to say anything about how that's related to the role of a teacher?
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, it seems that, like you say, in a sense, any activity can be done with greater or lesser degrees of intelligence. I guess it's been my experience that I've made the most gains, if you can call them gains, the most something, when there's that quality of intelligence, looking at things intelligently, is, let's say, facilitated by the source of that teaching, rather than, whether it's a relationship, a real world in the flesh kind of relationship, or some other kind of relationship that's meaningful, that it changes the way I experience the exploration.
Yeah, I mean, any work with a teacher or a teaching and so on and so forth is going to be valuable to the extent that it embodies an actual, intelligence, subtlety, nuance, and so on and so forth. And again, that can be that can perhaps be a condition of a sort of subjective resonance. You may find subtlety and intelligence in a context where another person may not, rather than a simple objective fact of, this is intelligence, across the board kind of thing. But, certainly, the whole value of a teacher is to reveal subtlety because of the nuance of direct relationship. The printed page or and so on and so forth is a stiffer medium, whereas interaction with a person, there's all sorts of nuance and subtlety, body language, vibes, whatever, all of which can certainly be media for conveying of that fact and of the importance of it. I mean, one can imagine two teachers that are essentially doing the same thing in terms of their activities or even the general words they're saying to the same person, perhaps on different occasions or whatever, and the subtlety or nuance that the teacher is that is actual for the teacher's relationship to their own experience will communicate itself above and beyond the words that are said or the actions that are being indulged in or promulgated and so on.
Thank you.
Peter, how would one go about bringing more intelligence to their experience?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, you can't bring more intelligence to your experience unless you already have the intelligence to bring. But, intelligence is in nuance, in subtlety, in fineness, to some degree, perhaps refinement. So, I would say appreciating your experience or being with your experience, tending towards more fineness, more subtlety, more delicacy, more sensitivity will certainly be in the direction of a more intelligent participation.
So like paying more attention to detail.
In a sense, but again, the very nature of subtlety and intelligence is it's beyond formula. It's spontaneous, it's inspired, it's non-linear, it can transcend simple recipes, which tend to be, by their very nature, more heavy-handed and more plodding and hence less intelligent, shall we say, or less subtle. So being able to color outside the lines, being able to break the rules, being able to be with things in a certain way and simultaneously be with them in another way, so on and so forth, to explore ambiguities and multidimensionality.
So would you say that the intelligence that one brings to their experience is based on a large part on the kind of patterning that they have been caged into?
Well, yes, but it's, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here. It's not a matter of bringing intelligence to experience. Experience itself is inconceivably intelligent. And so one discovers intelligence in experience. One discovers a finer intelligence. One discovers greater subtlety in the actuality of present experience by noticing it. It's not like you don't have to muster up some intelligence to bring to this inquiry or to bring to this investigation. On the contrary, just be with your experience in as open-ended a way as possible, and you will discover these qualities. And certainly the degree to which you are entrenched in patterning is a mode of dullness, is a mode of unintelligence, let's say, or shall we say lesser intelligence. Intelligence by its very nature is creative. It can explore alternatives. It can be mobile. It can be random access. It can be nonlinear. It can find loopholes in anything, and so on and so forth. And this is the very nature of intelligence. Shall we call it multidimensionality, or flexibility, adaptability. And these qualities, again, are inherent in the nature of what this is. In the objectivity of what it is. It's not like you need to bring these things from your subjectivity or from your history or from your functioning. All you need to do is, open as nakedly as you can to experience itself. And these qualities will reveal themselves because they are here to be discovered.
Seems to also go hand in hand with pleasure or appreciation or connectedness to what is happening.
Yeah, like aesthetic appreciation. Certainly, absolutely. Enjoyment.
Yes. Yeah.
Enjoyment is a really nice notion. Enjoyment and value are synonyms. To get the greatest value from your experience, get the greatest enjoyment from your experience, and vice versa. Ultimately, value is that which is enjoyable. Intelligence is the essence of what is enjoyable. Intelligence is, not coincidentally, the essence of what is valuable.
Nice.
All right, there's a question in the internet. At the retreat, you mentioned that radiance can be navigated via curiosity. Is curiosity alone enough? I've certainly gotten a lot of mileage out of it.
Yes, curiosity alone is enough. But again, it has to be a curiosity that finds itself inclined towards subtlety, rather than just moving around within the same dimensions. Curiosity that is willing to boldly go where it hasn't gone before, so to speak. That is a courageous curiosity, a creative curiosity, ideally. Which curiosity is inherently to some extent. It's just a matter of somehow tapping into that as an actuality.
Just an observation, and I thank you for saying something at the first meeting. I was lucky enough to watch the evening broadcast from your retreat. You made a point, as you often have in the past, of a glass. I think a glass probably is a thing handy, usually, and looking at from different angles and mentioning that as an experience, and that as you change the angle, the experience changes. And it finally dawned on me that all I have is experience. There is no glass, and that was
Bravo.
That was a mind opener. Yeah, and once I get to experience, there's no difference between this and the dream.
Bravo.
Same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But the only thing that does not exist in my experience is the object, the glass.
Correct. The fantasy of the object may exist.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's an experience.
Yeah, I understand that part of it, but what I think of as a glass that I'm that's the one thing that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The objects that that the universe is purported to be consisting of are the one things that don't exist.
Yes, exactly so. The only thing that exists is what we call experience.
Yes.
The most concrete you can get is experience. The most stable you can get is experience. The most impeding you can get is experience.
Most subtle.
And the most subtle. Yeah.
Which is the most obvious, ultimately.
And also the most obvious.
So we're
In
home
fact,
free.
all qualities whatsoever of any kind are to be found in experience and nowhere else, because experience alone exists. What we call experience is the totality of being. And experience is intrinsically transcendental in the sense that it has no limits to its fineness, to its quantity of information, let's say, of qualities, and so on and so forth.
And it's odd and ironic and amusing to think that we're seeking experience so hard.
Yeah. All the fish are looking for water.
In that last exchange, you're talking about intelligence and so forth, and just another observation. I had a sudden image of a TV interviewer interviewing reality, which was meaningful to me in any case. That we don't bring intelligence to reality, but we come like a TV interviewer, and he's sitting down across from the table, and the lights are on, the cameras are rolling, and you're interviewing, and that relationship seemed meaningful to me. It's probably what the image is talking to me about, but the interviewer is just open, and he comes prepared to elicit, but he doesn't actually bring anything to the table.
Yes. The value is all in experience. We don't need to supply it. We don't need to churn it out or manufacture it. All we need to do is be receptive, be open to it, be present. And the less of an agenda we have, the more we will receive what is actually there. So, of course, what can block that exchange to any extent is having preconceptions, having an agenda, having what you think you want to or are going to get from it, which if anything will have a sort of a censorious kind of a effect. Whereas if you're just, okay, show me what you got, let's see. And then in that stance of openness, in that stance of intelligent present receptivity, then the inherent intelligence of experience itself reveals itself. Experience does not need to be improved or refined or brought to perfection. It is itself the absolute. And of course, there being nothing but experience, there is nothing but the absolute. So, that's where the image of the interviewer kind of breaks down, because there isn't really any interviewer. But to the extent it feels like there is one, then absolutely, have respect for the interviewee, and let its value and authority reveal itself. Exactly, yeah. Great doings in the chat room. Good. The radiance, the very medium of experience itself, is pure intelligence. It's pure revelation, it's pure value, it's pure information. So simply being with the very medium, the very substance of experience is sufficient. It reveals what it is, it shows what it is simply by noticing.
It seems that there are flavors of experience, and there are subtle shifts. During the retreat we sat quite a lot, and I got a certain flavor from that. And then when we were outside with the sky, there was another flavor. Mm-hmm. And when I sit, I sit and watch my white screen. There's another flavor altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's undoubtedly all the same thing, but my experience has subtle shifts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't seem to relate to anything.
Yeah. There's an endless range of, call them dimensions within experience, endless range of whole qualitative, we don't really have words for these things. I mean, I use this word dimensions because it seems meaningful to me. But there's no limit to the range of different ways that experience can appear, can be with itself, not just with minute aspects, but grossly and heavy-handedly different from itself. And this is part of the reason why it's so bewildering and so confusing, because we look at this incredible range of qualitative experience and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with itself, and we try to sort it out and make sense of it, and then typically we forget large portions of it and specialize and focus on certain smaller areas because they seem to have more coherence that we can get a handle on. But the notion that a handle cannot be gotten on this, experience cannot be assimilated, you can't make sense of it, you can't make it into something that's coherent. It is a range of literally infinite qualities. And to learn to be comfortable, to learn to be easy with that range of incoherence, with that range of it's hard to come up with accurate words or clear words. But to learn to be comfortable with anything that is that amorphous, that vast, that different than itself, is really the challenge. Because it's bewildering if you're used to trying to make sense of things. What this is cannot be made sense of. You can't make sense of it. You can't assimilate it. You can't correlate it with anything. You can't fit it with itself. It's too broad. It's too elusive. It's too multidimensional. And every aspect of it is equally meaningful. There's no hierarchy. It's not like, this portion of it is now I'm getting close to the real thing, now I'm getting close to the essence. Every portion of actuality is the essence, but a different presentation of it. It can be a vastly different presentation of it. So, learning, this is where intelligence and subtlety comes in. Learning to be comfortable with that broad a range of qualities of experience that cannot be interrelated. They can't be related to themselves except to the extent that they are actual. They are what I've been calling radiant presence. That's their common denominator. But the range of ways or modes or qualities or dimensions or what have you that this radiant presence can present itself in is literally unlimited and vastly different from each other.
Yet, no, it's yet, when I am doing a practice, and I'm not very practice-oriented, but when I am doing a practice, there is a certain flavor associated with that practice.
Yes, exactly so. Practices or modes are like tuning mechanisms. It's like on a radio where you tune to a certain frequency band and then you pick up a certain channel. So you can do this, like for example with the Togel exercises or things like this. You are literally, you're focusing in on a certain, arbitrary, we don't have words for this, but you're focusing in on a certain bandwidth of experience, and you will have a tendency to perceive a certain range of phenomena within that bandwidth, or qualities, or however, again, we can't really qualify. But yeah, it's tunable, so it is navigable to some extent, and you can notice these things. But then there are always subbands and subdimensions and upper harmonics, and so the whole thing, again, even when it seems to have some degree of coherence in terms of being targetable to some extent or tunable to some extent, within that you will still find infinity.
Absolutely. What kind of interesting for me was you lent me a book once which talked about Toggle visions, and it was written by two people who described seeing deities. I don't know, I think they called them gods, but whatever it was. And I thought, okay, well, they're just Buddhists and this is their take on it. And of course it's not that. But lo and behold, I had the same experience. Just as
that's humbling for an atheist like you, eh?
Very humbling, but it was just like I'd assumed that was a societal interpretation of what was going on, but I come from a different society background, somewhat anyhow, and yet, bang, the same thing happened. It was just like, you remember that book, it was drawings, and there they were, these little deities. It was quite remarkable that it is completely open, and yet it is in some way prescribed. I don't know, prescribed is too strong a word, but there is a system.
It is as it is, and the way that it is can be perceived, and in perceiving it you will see what is there. So several beings looking and perceiving what is there will tend to perceive a similar range of things, even though the specifics, of course, will be divergent.
Yeah.
The Togel is fascinating because it theoretically it claims to be, the most primordial vision that can occur, and it is very subtle. It certainly is very subtle, and has endless upper harmonics and so on. So. John?
Theoretical question, I guess, or academic, but I'm interested in Toggle. I am not a practitioner of Toggle, but I get the impression that there is actually a hierarchy there, and yet I guess there shouldn't be, should there? There's some things that are easy to see. Things
I wouldn't say it's a hierarchy so much as a learning curve or a development of sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of development of skill and sensitivity of perception.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you get more goodies from the more subtle ones and some very preliminary ones that everybody can see pretty much without much effort? And then they're more subtle. What is the value of going into the subtlety of that?
It's a more primal, more complete aspect of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Less superficial, you might say. But this is something that it shows what it is through the doing of it.
there's some warnings in the literature that that Togl, without a prior understanding, which would come from the other disciplines, doesn't necessarily work for you. In other words,
Right.
you get caught in lights and flashing
Yeah.
lights, so what?
Well, it won't do you much good.
Mm-hmm.
You can get the phenomena, but it won't have the power.
Mm.
If you relate to it in terms of any degree of relationality, any degree of, a frame of reference. The power is being with it referenceless, in referencelessness.
Okay, let's see. It's a two-parter, I think. The idea that there are no events, that nothing's really happening. Philip K. had a version of it in Valis. There's a small dot or something which exchanges information about supposed events and nothing else. Does everything just keep getting more subtle and sophisticated without end?
Yes.
Succinct. Care to expand?
Good book, by the way.
Oh, someone earlier on wanted to know, what is that book on Toggyal visions?
There's a lot of them. The one that John was talking about is called... Remember the title? It's that book by those people that has that title.
Senior moment. Oh, John's going to go get it.
We'll have that answer for you in the flesh.
Real soon.
Via digitization presently.
If soon never gets here. Okay. Luminous heart of inner radiance, drawings of the Toggyal visions, maybe?
That'll do it.
And see? That'll do it. Good. Bingo.
You can get it on Amazon.
Very good. HFC? HFC?
I think we got it already, John.
Oh, is it the same title? Luminous heart of the inner radiance, drawings on the Toggyal visions. Yep, that was the one. Nice book. The author? Who wrote it?
Robert and Rachel Olds.
Robert and Rachel Olds. Olds. If the nature of consciousness is direct knowledge, can intellectual judgment be seen as a veil?
No. Intellectual judgment is an aspect of the direct engagement of consciousness. It's not a veil, it's just a quite small portion of it. There are no veils. Nothing veils anything. Everything coexists and nothing gets in the way of anything else. The only seeming veiling that can occur is if you become obsessed with a certain portion of things to the extent that you ignore other portions. But it's not an actual veiling, it's not an actual blockage, that's just an obsession or a distraction. Kind of an auto-hypnosis where you censor your own experience so that you don't let yourself be sensitive to it or be aware of certain aspects of it, largely because you have an obsession with certain other aspects of it. But if you actually look, all portions of experience are always available. They're all here. They don't get in each other's way. Experience does not block itself. Experience coexists with itself in openness, in availability.
Any definition is such a tiny, tiny part of radiance that it actually belies a position.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I started talking earlier tonight about subtlety and intelligence, which is really just about noticing the vast range of experience, the vast range of qualitative experience. And we usually, or let's say by and large, many people seem to not notice the full range of what is available to be noticed, again largely because of an obsession or a heightened importance of certain very, very small portions of experience as being what matters, and the rest of it is written off or ignored or devalued as having any importance, so as a result no attention is given to it. But everything is available to be noticed. It's simply a matter of stop being biased, now stop being a chauvinist towards certain portions of experience and just assume anything whatsoever that can show up in experience is equally valuable, and try and take a survey, open to the fullness of it. And you will discover infinite dimensionality, you will discover infinite subtlety, you will discover infinite ways of cross-correlation, interrelationship, and meaningfulness, most of which are totally non-linear and irrational, but profound. Dean's hot tonight.
I'm not hot, I'm just distracted. And I've got three things that I'm not sure which one I'm going to ask. But I did want to ask, again, academic, John was talking about flavors. There must be a different flavor between the different kayas. There must be a flavor of Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya.
Very much so.
And I've always been intrigued with the terminology of those. What the dickens Dharmakaya, the body of Dharma, has to do with the philosophical or the actual meaning. But especially Sambhogakaya, which means just a mass of enjoyment. You were talking about Satchidananda.
Yeah.
And the Ananda part of that, does that relate somehow to the radiance itself of Sambhogakaya?
Yes. again, it's arbitrary to characterize it, but Dharmakaya looks like pure being, which of course can't be found, and yet is undeniable. Sambhogakaya looks like pure radiance with its inherent tendency to polarize within itself and to sort of set up virtual spectra, let's say. Nirmanakaya refers to the tendency of the radiance to show up as patterns. So they're interrelated and not really separable, but they certainly have a very different flavor. But it's not accurate to think of them as things. They're not things, they're perspectives on this. And this is the only thing, to the so-called, to the extent there is a thing, it is this. And each of those are three viewpoints on this, let's say, three prime, well, you can call them axes of analysis or, whatever. But they don't actually exist as coherent entities. There's sort of three extremes that this can be seen in terms of. So this can be seen in terms of pure being as Dharmakaya. This can be seen in terms of pure radiance in its nature as Sambhogakaya. This can be seen as pure patterning as Nirmanakaya.
In the literature, Nirmanakaya is often spoken to as relatedness, or I think relatedness is the term that they translate it as. Yeah. Does it last long enough to actually have a relatedness?
Well, it's a virtual relatedness, it's an apparent relatedness. The most profound Dzogchen texts I've seen talking about the three kayas talk about the Nirmanakaya as uncertainty and the Sambhogakaya as certainty, because the radiance alone is certain. The patterns are uncertain. The patterns are virtual in the sense that they're apparent, but you can't actually resolve them. Whereas the radiance is not resolvable, but it doesn't need to be resolvable because it is actual.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Which is kind of a little backwards from a sort of a commonsensical intuition a priori that you might expect to find there, but actually you can see the truth of it. The Nirmanakaya exhibits indeterminacy, exhibits unresolvability, most certainly, even though it is the most explicit, in a certain way, aspect of this. I think we have something back there at the computer.
What book did you find that text that you just mentioned?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I think it might be, there's a book by, I think, a man named James Lowe. Does that sound right? Called Simply Being.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not certain if it's still in print or not. I'm not sure if the man's name is James Lowe, but the book is called Simply Being. It's a British publication, and it's a collection of a bunch of texts, most of which are Dzogchen or Mahamudra texts, and there's some very good, nice texts in there. I think it might have been from there.
Susan found it. Okay, there's a question from somebody here. You emphasize noticing through the side of ever-changing phenomena, rarely mentioning noticing the...
I'm sorry, I can't make that a little slower, please?
Okay, yeah. You emphasize noticing through the side of ever-changing phenomena.
Side, through the side?
Side.
Okay.
Let me finish the question. Rarely mentioning noticing the unchanging.
Right.
It seems to me noticing the unchanging is perhaps easier. Is this the same key?
You can notice the unchanging if you can find anything that's unchanging. The unchanging is obvious, but it's completely unfindable. So it's a bit of a challenge. I think there's a bias. I'm sorry?
I don't think that's true, personally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but go ahead.
This is my argument with a lot of modern, I guess it would be Neo-Advaita or whatever. The sort of the who's asking the question kind of approach. It's awareness is sort of it. Go to awareness, and all of a sudden everything makes sense. But this awareness gets subtly separated from experience, from phenomena. This sort of phenomena and awareness, and the phenomena is changing, and the awareness is still and fixed. And I can't find any awareness. I can't find anything that's still and fixed, and I can't find anything that is separable from experience. Experience is one thing, and it is arguably unchangingly itself. It is constantly itself.
That's it.
But that cannot be found as a thing, as a condition. It's just a self-evident intuition. The beingness of it, the isness, is a constant. But isness is not really resolvable as anything that you can settle on. Isness is exemplified by everything that's changing. What is? Well, all of this information, all these qualities, all of this experience is. And and they are very obvious and explicit. Whereas the isness itself is implicit and is revealed in the characteristics. But it's not like the characteristics are over here and the isness is over here, in any sense separate from it, or separable or differentiable.
The same person says, I find it hard not to find the unchanging. Not as a thing, though.
Cool.
Okay, now a different question. As experience gets ever subtler, do you eventually find you have no one to talk to?
Yeah, I found that a long time ago. That's why I talk to myself.
Going back to the kayas, where does bliss come in?
Well, in terms of the theory of the kayas, and this is getting into theory, the Sambhogakaya means, the word Sambhogakaya means body of enjoyment, which would be body of bliss. So the radiance of Sambhogakaya is bliss. The energy, the shining forth, is exuberant bliss, is joyfulness, is, the wah factor of being.
So that's the Ananda, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, the problem with that is that Sambhogakaya contains everything, some of which might not be quite so blissful.
But you can't. It's a matter of defining. Don't define bliss in terms of some non-bliss. The absolute bliss is the bliss of radiance, which is ubiquitous. And pain is extremely blissful. It's extremely radiant. Suffering is extremely blissful.
Maybe this is why you can't find anyone to talk to.
I'm just honest.
No, I follow you.
Next time you have a toothache, just notice how your tongue keeps sneaking back to poke it, and you go, "Oh yeah, it hurts still there."
No, I know there's a.
And then your tongue goes back and pokes again. Oh, it's still. Why is that? If it hurts, and you arguably don't want to do it, why do you keep poking it with your tongue?
Yeah.
Because you like it.
Yeah.
We love experience. Experience is juicy. Experience is fun. Experience is... Or next time, you say you're walking down a street and you smell a really bad smell. You just watch. You take another whiff. You do, right? You go, oh, God, it smells awful. And you go, oh, God, it smells awful. God. Oh, God. Watch. Look and see. Tell me if that's true.
I remember you took us through this argument a few times. I remember that. I think you're right.
Well, look at your own experience and see if it's true.
We like graveyard humor, and we like horror movies. We like to be terrified.
Sure, we like to be terrified.
Yeah.
We love these things.
I have a definition question that often comes in. You're speaking of Buddhist writings. That they often refer to something, I don't know what the word they're translating is because I don't know Tibetan, but as enlightened intent or intent. Can you help me with understanding what's the subtlety of that particular phrase, enlightened intent? They're talking about the foundation reality level of presence and awareness, and they'll refer to it as enlightened intent.
Well, the very nature of the radiance is to discover itself, to reveal itself and discover itself. So that is the enlightened intent. The enlightened intent is the intent of discovery, and all of this is an expression of that intent. All of this is the radiance's exploration of itself, which it is affecting. It is doing it by its very nature. So that could be said to be its intent. But again, that's sort of philosophy. But experience is an ongoing and unstoppable self-discovery. An ongoing experiencing of new qualities, of new revelation of what this is. Right? And so this is what's happening here. This is unstoppably what is always happening. And so the inherent intent of that is whatever that is doing, which can certainly be said to be a self-exploration or a self-revelation, a self-discovery, which can, of course, be said to be enlightened in the sense that it tends towards enlightenment, which simply means discovering what this is.
Parallel term is awakened mind. That stopped me a few times because that implies a non-awakened mind.
Well, awakened mind is actually almost a direct translation of the Tibetan word for enlightenment. The original word in I guess it's Sanskrit or Pali or something is bodhicitta, which means literally enlightened mind. And the Tibetan word is changchub sem, which means pure, perfect mind. 3 words, changchub sem, sort of as a contraction or something. And pure, perfect mind refers to the purity of that mind, means it's untainted, it's unsulliable, it's absolutely transparent and lucid and unable to be defiled. And perfect, it means perfect in a sense of complete, of not needing anything extra. It is not in a state of immaturity, it is in a state of finality. It is in its final condition. And this is synonymous with enlightenment. And is also synonymous with the very nature of what this is. So the discovery of what this is the discovery of enlightenment. Because this mind is fundamentally ungrasping. Reality is fundamentally unblocked. It's fundamentally undivided. It's fundamentally unimpeded. It is fundamentally transparent to itself. It doesn't grasp itself. It doesn't hold itself back. It doesn't get in its own way. And this refers to changchub sem. It refers to this mind or this consciousness as absolutely ungrasping, clear, and perfect. And by contrast, an unawakened mind would be a mind that tends to grasp, that tends to hold. And in this case, it refers to the holding of interpretations, the holding of definitions, the holding that, oh, this is this and that's that, I'm me, and so on and so on. The holding of worldviews, the holding of interpretations and perspectives and so on, which don't actually exist. They only exist as a fantasy, because the actuality is intrinsically unimpeded. It's intrinsically unheld. And the noticing of that fact, the discovery of that fact, is the discovery of the enlightened condition, which always actually exists, which alone actually exists.
So in that sense, they start at the they start at the finish line, as you said.
Yes. You know, Dzogchen is a very simple path, because you start at the finish line. You simply notice that this is the case, that this is intrinsically unimpeded and clear and inviolable as it is, and having noticed that, you remain with that awareness, which is the state of enlightenment and awakening, what have you, and also which is also the basic condition, the intrinsic condition, the natural state of what this is. But all this theory aside, it's really, really very simple. It's simply a matter of noticing what this is. Notice what this experience is. And it does not depend upon theory. It does not depend upon knowing all these words. And even though these words rather artfully and interestingly refer to this and will direct our attention back to this, it's not really essential at all. Because this fact that is actual, that is always right here, right now, that is always present as your experience, is itself intrinsically transcendental in the most strong sense, which means it's liberating, it's revelation of infinity, it's revelation of all possible highest qualities, etc., etc., etc. And so it simply needs to be noticed, that is already the case, that is already completely available and unblocked and obvious. No theory needed, no terminology needed, no Eastern cultures needed. Although they're fine, that doesn't get in the way of anything, of course.
So if this is the awareness of the unimpeded mind, then what's going on when it is impeded?
It's never impeded. It only generates fantasy, and fantasy is unimpededly fantasy. And when fantasy is occurring, nothing is actually blocked, nothing is actually restricted in any sense at all within experience. The only thing that restricts it apparently restricts it, is an obsession with fantasy and an orientation to fantasy as if it had importance, as if it was larger than other aspects of experience, which of course is never actually the case.
So we're really just talking about say, awareness being aware of itself, or just the natural awareness of recognition.
Sure. And there's always recognition, and recognition is always of this. This is always recognized. In the sense that this is always present, the presence of this, the presence of experience, is inherently recognition. Experience and recognition are synonyms, and experience never stops. You can't stop it, can't shut it off, never goes away. And what is to be recognized is nothing other than experience itself.
Yeah, it's like the...
But not selectively. And that's if error is possible, that error consists of being selective with an experience, and discrediting vast portions of it, vast qualities of it, vast spectra of apparent qualities and frequencies and textures that are present in favor of other textures which are held to be more important. That's the fallacy. It's all equally important or unimportant, but it's all the same. Experience is equally valuable with all and any other experience. And we're blinded by this continually. Just because you happen to be thinking a thought doesn't make that more important than anything else. Just because your eyes happen to be lighted on an object doesn't make that object actually any more important than anything else within the field of vision, and so on and so forth. The full field is always present, and the full field is always valuable, all of it, regardless of where your attention happens to be lighting. It's really that simple.
Peter, do you define awareness as presence?
Yeah. Less vice versa, actually.
Yeah.
I don't like this word awareness for no particular reason. I think it's a little misleading.
I can't resist, but because this was an observation I was making this week myself about awareness and presence. I was trying to see what those were in my experience, and so far as I could see. And what I came to, you can correct me on this, but what I came to was I exist, and I know that I exist by some means. But the fact that I exist is undeniable. And to me that was presence. I said I got presence. But then there's another facet to that. I exist, that's presence. But I know that I exist by another indefinable feature of my nature. I can somehow know that I exist. And I was thinking of that as awareness. I was trying to define these two. The fact that I know I exist is hierarchically...
Why are they two?
Well, just in their functionality, I think.
How can you exist in the first instance if without knowing you exist? I would say the knowing of your existence consists of the existence itself, which I would say is presence. So presence, then we can... So I think it's more of a logical circumlocution to say, I exist and I know that I exist. There's no need for and I know that I exist. I exist. That fact is the knowledge. You don't need to have a recursive, another loop of, and I know that I exist, and I know that I know that I exist, and I say that I know that I exist. It's not necessary, it's redundant, because I am is the knowing of I am, or else you can't make the assertion. There's no basis for the assertion. See what I mean? In other words, the certainty that of presence, as I would put it, or existence, as you're putting it, is its own awareness, is its own knowing. So I would say existence is synonymous with knowing. Existence is a knowing. Knowing is an existence.
Yes, I can see that.
And awareness to me is just a redundancy. Again, it has bothersome implications, like the kind of logical loop you're going to. Whereas if you just stop with existence, and existence, the fact of existence is self-known by that fact, just stop there. You don't need awareness. You don't need all these other qualities. You just have actuality is known in its actuality. And it can't be said how that is. It's not known by something. It's not known by someone. It just is known. So presence, strangely, miraculously, and irrationally, in its actuality, is known.
And it subsumes everything.
Yes, and there's nothing other than that fact. So the statement "presence is" is a complete statement of the totality of reality, and all the qualities and characteristics are the way that is that. So presence is as this infinite range of characteristics and dynamism, etc., etc. But all of that is not subcategories. That is just the nature of presence itself. Or you might say the nature of the radiance itself, because the radiance is presence. Presence is radiance. Radiant presence.
Radiant presence.
And I don't see the need for any additional qualities or agencies or activities other than that simple, bald fact.
I wasn't actually making them, there was definitely making a difference in value between them. The awareness is secondary to it, and the awareness spins off into a regressus ad infinitum, and to me, the awareness is the confusion that we're in.
Yeah, and I think it's unnecessary because I think it's just imputed. I don't think it's actual. It's like self is imputed. There is presence, and so it's easy to jump into the logical loop of there is presence, so I am present, or I am seeing the presence, or something. But that's not really necessary. That's just a logical loop. It's sort of a semantic. It gets defined into existence, just sort of bootstrapped up out of nothing. The simple fact of the presence is presence, the actuality of presence, even though it's completely irrational, makes absolutely no sense. Still in all, if you can just stop with that, where's the problem? You don't need awareness, you don't need a self. Presence is awareness, presence is a self. And this fits in rather nicely with some of the more profound teachings. Ramana Maharshi said, the self is realized. The Atman is realized already. What is realized is presence. It's actual. So you don't need to, have a separate, a self and the presence, and that are in some sort of a relationship. It's just confusion. You don't need it. It's unnecessary, because if you look at this presence, there's nothing missing. And why suppose it needs an agency? It's just miraculous. It's the magic wand is waved and there's presence. So that doesn't make any sense, but so what? Who expected it to make sense? Coming up.
What is consciousness? And then they write chit.
Well, the word chit is consciousness. I don't think there is any consciousness. I think consciousness is another confusion. I think there is presence.
All right, another question. Do you always notice in dreams, or are you often taken in by dreams, believing the dream structure? Just curious.
Both at once, varying degrees. Same when I'm waking. For example, I am not always 100% detached. I frequently enter very fully into participation in the actuality of the apparent activities or actions that seem to be occurring in my experience, but I'm never stuck in it, I'm never entrapped in it, because I know that it's all radiance. And so once you know that it's all radiance, there's no advantage to being detached, there's no advantage to not being detached, it just doesn't matter. So you can enter fully into any degree of participation in your experience that you want, and there's nothing gained and nothing lost by doing so. You know, this is intrinsic in the nature of spiritual advice. Different spiritual advice is appropriate for people in different phases of their unfoldment, and frequently the contrary advice is appropriate at different points. You know, to a person who's just beginning, it can be very useful to detach themselves from their investment, to distance themselves, to learn detachment, to learn to not get sucked into their interpretations, but as a vehicle to discover what this is. Once you've discovered what this is, then the contrary becomes the case. Then you discover that there's no privileged point of view within experience, there's no superior mode. Detachment is in no way better or worse than total investment, and it no longer is an issue. So at that point, you can do whatever you like, and it doesn't matter at all. You can go where you like in experience, and there's no repercussions, because it's all radiance. You never depart from radiance, so you don't need to be detached or anything. So the advantage of all this practice and experimentation and detachment is to discover radiance. You know, having discovered radiance, then it's a different ballgame altogether.
Third question. What is presence? The term seems like a placeholder to me.
Actuality. Actuality is actual. It's not, it's concrete. It's a fact. It's the sole fact. The sole fact is actuality, and the qualities of actuality are the range that actuality can appear in. So it's not an abstraction in the least. On the contrary, it's the only concrete quality. It's the only actual quality. Presence equals actuality. And what that is and how that is cannot be said, of course, but nonetheless it is what it is. It's the only thing that can be said to be. What is what's actual, and what is what I call this presence. Because what is findable because it is present. It's here now. So this word presence indicates where to look for this actuality, you might say. And then the word radiance indicates the qualitative aspect of this presence. You have a question over here?
Hi. I think of radiance as meaning something like lighted from within.
Sure.
And but it sounds as if you have another definition of it that you're also using. Could you say what that might be?
Well, I would say if I was going to refine your definition of lighted from within, I would just say lighted from actuality. Whether that turns out to be within or without is kind of a moot point.
Oh, okay.
But experience can be said to be lighted.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up, it appears. And this is what I mean by radiance. it appears dynamically. So your vision appears in your experience. Your sensation appears, rather dynamically, rather forcefully and unstoppably, in a mode that, to me, is analogous to the notion, the implications of this word radiance. Mm-hmm. It jumps forth quite positively, quite accurately into experience, and all the qualities that appear in experience do so, right? And so this is what I mean by radiance. My eyes aren't quite that good. Okay. I'm going to thank you all for coming tonight. We're at closing time, and I've had a lovely evening. I hope you have. If you have the time to stick around, we'll have a little soiree and some refreshments afterwards, which you're welcome to share, and a little socializing, light chat, good jokes, general rousing time.